I thought moving in with my son Daniel after Martha's death would bring comfort. Instead, I sat frozen as he slammed his fist on the table. You live in my house for free. Half of your pension will cover the rent. His wife Stephanie nodded coldly. $28,000. That's what my own son wanted from me annually. As I rose from that dinner table, my mind wasn't on their greed. It was on the documents in my basement safe and the phone call I'd make tomorrow morning. The morning after my wife Martha passed away from pancreatic cancer, I stood in our empty house feeling utterly lost. 43 years we'd shared that space, and suddenly every corner echoed with memories that threatened to swallow me whole. That's when Daniel called. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone right now." His voice had been thick with concern. "Come stay with us. Stephanie and I have that whole guest suite downstairs. It'll be good for you to be around family." I'd hesitated at first. At 68 years old, I valued my independence. But grief has a way of making you vulnerable to kindness, even when that kindness comes with hidden motives. The first month had been pleasant enough. Daniel worked long hours at his job as a regional manager for a tech distribution company, while Stephanie stayed home claiming to run some sort of online consulting business that never seemed to require her attention. They lived in a sprawling 4,000-square-foot house in Bellevue, all gleaming countertops and pristine white carpets that made me nervous every time I walked through with my morning coffee. Things started changing subtly around month 2. Stephanie began making small comments during dinner. "The grocery bills have really gone up since you moved in, Jefferson," she'd say, with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Or, "The water bill was shocking this month. I guess that's what happens with 3 people taking showers." I offered to contribute to household expenses immediately. "Let me pay for the groceries," I'd said, pulling out my wallet. "It's the least I can do." "Oh no," Daniel had interjected quickly. "We couldn't ask that of you, Dad. Your family." But the comments continued. By month 3, I noticed mail disappearing from the kitchen counter where the postman left it. My pension statements from Boeing, where I'd worked for 38 years as an aerospace engineer, vanished before I could grab them. When I asked about it, Stephanie claimed she'd accidentally thrown them away with the junk mail. "You know how forgetful you've been lately, Jefferson," she'd added, with fake concern. "Maybe you already looked at them and forgot." I hadn't been forgetful at all, but I played along, wondering what game they were playing. The truth revealed itself gradually. Daniel started asking probing questions about my finances. "That Boeing pension must be pretty good, huh, Dad? You guys had those golden retirement packages back in the day." "It's comfortable," I'd responded vaguely. "And Mom's life insurance, I hope you got something decent. She deserved that after everything she went through." The questions made my skin crawl, but I kept my responses neutral and changed the subject whenever possible. Then came the conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I have excellent hearing for my age, something they didn't account for when they discussed my financial situation in the kitchen while thinking I was napping in the living room. His pension statement showed $56,000 a year. Stephanie's voice had carried clearly. Plus Social Security. He's probably pulling in $75,000 annually just sitting around our house. "And he's got savings," Daniel had added. "Mom mentioned once they had close to $500,000 in their retirement accounts. Plus the house in Renton should sell for at least $600,000. "We need to be smart about this," Stephanie had counseled. "Your father seems sharp still. We can't just demand money outright." That's when I realized my son wasn't the man I'd raised him to be. Or maybe he was exactly who he'd always been, and grief had blinded me to it. The real shock came 2 weeks later, when I overheard Daniel on a phone call in his home office. I'd gone downstairs to grab a book and heard his voice through the door. "Yes, I understand the process for power of attorney," he was saying. "What kind of documentation would we need to show diminished capacity? He's been more forgetful lately, confused about dates and appointments. Would that be enough?" My blood ran cold. My own son was plotting to have me declared incompetent. What about financial elder abuse laws? Daniel continued. If he's living in our home and we're caring for him, surely we have some rights to compensation. I crept back upstairs, my mind racing. They weren't just after my money, they were orchestrating a complete takeover of my life. The comments about forgetfulness, the missing mail, the probing questions, it all made sense now. They were building a case. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. Daniel kept refilling my wine glass, even when I said I'd had enough. Stephanie asked me the same question 3 times, then exchanged meaningful looks with her husband when I pointed out the repetition. Just checking if you were paying attention, Jefferson, she'd said sweetly. You seemed a little distant today. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. In my room, I sat on the bed Martha and I had shared for 4 decades and felt rage building in my chest. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do foolish things. This was cold, calculated anger, the kind that helps you think clearly and plan carefully. My son wanted to play games with my life, fine. I'd spent 4 years in military intelligence before my engineering career. I knew how to gather information, how to plan operations, and most importantly, how to appear exactly how I needed to appear. Looking back at that moment now, I realize it was when everything shifted. The grieving widower disappeared, replaced by someone my son had never met, someone who wouldn't be anyone's victim. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen with slightly stooped shoulders, fumbling with my coffee mug just enough to seem unsteady. Morning, Dad, Daniel said, barely glancing up from his phone. Sleep okay? Oh, you know, I replied, vaguely, adding a tremor to my voice that hadn't been there before. These old bones don't rest like they used to. Stephanie's eyes lit up with interest. Maybe we should get you checked out by a doctor. Make sure everything's okay. Maybe. I agreed, then deliberately called her by the wrong name. Thank you for the concern, Sandra. It's Stephanie Jefferson, she corrected, exchanging another one of those looks with Daniel. Of course, I mumbled, stirring my coffee with a fork instead of a spoon. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe their plan was working. Because while they plotted to steal my future, I was already 3 steps ahead, documenting everything, recording every conversation, and preparing for the moment when their house of cards would come crashing down around them. The predator had become the prey. They just didn't know it yet. 3 nights after I'd overheard Daniel's phone call about power of attorney, I discovered the full extent of their scheme. It was a Tuesday evening, and they thought I was asleep on the living room couch. The television droned on with some crime procedural I'd pretended to watch before letting my eyes drift closed and my breathing deepen into the rhythm of sleep. From my position, I could hear them clearly in the kitchen. Stephanie's heels clicked against the tile floor as she paced, while Daniel's voice carried that edge of desperation I'd been noticing more frequently. We're drowning here, Stephanie hissed. 3 months behind on the mortgage, Daniel. 3 months they're sending foreclosure notices. I know, my son replied wearily. But my commission check should hit next week. Your commission check won't even cover 1 month, and you know it. We need real money, not your promises. I kept my breathing steady while slowly reaching for my phone tucked between the couch cushions. The recording app I'd downloaded was simple to use even with my eyes closed. 1 tap, and it was capturing every word. Your father has plenty, Stephanie continued. Sitting on all that money while we're about to lose everything. It's not right. He worked for that money. Daniel said, though his protest sounded weak. And you're working yourself to death trying to maintain this lifestyle. Besides, what's he going to do with it? He's already had his life. This is supposed to be our time. There was a pause, then the sound of papers rustling. Kyle sent over the plan, Stephanie said. My brother knows what he's doing. He's handled this kind of situation before. I still don't like involving Kyle. The man's sketchy. Sketchy gets things done. Look, it's simple. We establish a pattern of concerning behavior, get him evaluated by the right doctor, and petition for conservatorship. Once we have control of his finances, we can pay off our debts and put him somewhere nice." "Somewhere nice!" The casual way she discussed disposing of me sent ice through my veins. "What about Marcus?" Daniel asked. "My brother won't just stand by if Dad suddenly needs a nursing home." "Your brother, the high and mighty surgeon who hasn't visited in 2 years, please. He's too busy with his perfect life in Seattle to care. We're the ones taking care of your father. We deserve compensation." I heard a chair scrape. Then Daniel's voice, closer now. "The back rent idea is brilliant. 6 months at $2,300 a month. That's almost $14,000 we can demand immediately. And once he's confused about owing it, we use that as evidence of cognitive decline. Kyle's already talked to a lawyer who specializes in this. Apparently it's easier than you'd think to get conservatorship when there's documented financial confusion." My phone vibrated slightly. Storage warning. I'd been recording for 20 minutes. Carefully, I stopped the recording and started a new one. "What about his medications?" Daniel asked. "Dad's sharp as a tack most days." "I've been handling that," Stephanie replied with a tone that made my stomach turn. "His blood pressure pills look just like aspirin. I've been swapping them out gradually. Missing doses of lisinopril can cause confusion, dizziness, all the symptoms we need to document." "Jesus, Steph, that could hurt him." "It won't hurt him," she said dismissively. "Just make him a little foggy. Besides, your father's tough as nails. A little confusion won't kill him." They continued discussing details, forged signatures on small checks to test if I'd notice intercepted mail, including letters from Marcus, plans to have me sign a lease agreement they'd backdated. Each revelation was another knife in my back, but I forced myself to remain still to keep recording. "I found his bank statements in his room," Daniel added. "He's got more than we thought. Between savings and checking, there's over $300,000 just sitting there. Plus his investment portfolio," Stephanie said eagerly. "I saw quarterly statements from Vanguard, another $400,000 at least. And the house in Renton. Mom's death means no capital gains tax if he sells soon." They were counting my money like vultures over a carcass, except this carcass was very much alive and listening to every word. The conversation shifted to logistics. Kyle would come for dinner Thursday night, posing as a financial advisor friend. They'd already been telling neighbors and family friends that I was showing signs of dementia. Daniel had even called my doctor's office pretending to be concerned about my mental state. "Dr. Morrison is too smart, though," Daniel said. "He's known Dad for 20 years. He won't just declare him incompetent." "We don't need Morrison," Stephanie replied. "Kyle knows someone, Dr. Renfield. He's more flexible about these situations. Expensive, but flexible." I'd heard enough. Slowly, carefully, I shifted position, as if stirring from sleep, making sure to knock over the remote control in the process. The clatter sent them both rushing to check on me. Daniel's face appeared above me, fake concern etched across his features. "You okay?" I blinked slowly, adding confusion to my expression. "Daniel, what time is it? I was having the strangest dream about your mother." "It's almost 9, Jefferson," Stephanie said, studying me closely. "Have you taken your evening medications?" "Did I can't seem to remember. Maybe the days run together sometimes." They exchanged triumphant glances, and I wanted to vomit. Instead, I let them help me to my room, shuffling my feet and gripping Daniel's arm as if I needed the support. Once alone, I immediately backed up the recordings to 3 different cloud services and emailed copies to a draft folder in an email account they didn't know existed. Then I sat at the small desk in my room and began documenting everything in a journal I kept hidden inside an old engineering textbook. The scope of their betrayal was staggering. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike who I'd sent to college, who stood beside me at his mother's funeral just 6 months ago, was actively plotting to destroy my life for money. But the medication tampering, that was attempted murder in my book. Stephanie didn't care if missing blood pressure medication caused me to stroke out as long as they got paid first. I pulled out the flip phone I'd bought at a gas station, paid for in cash. My real phone, the one they monitored, stayed on the nightstand. On the burner phone, I sent a text to my old military buddy Robert Hutchinson, now a successful attorney specializing in elder law. Code red. Need immediate assistance. They're making their move. His response came within minutes. Safe house available. Extraction when ready. Document everything. Over the next 2 days, I played my role perfectly. I called Stephanie by her sister's name, forgot where I put my glasses while wearing them, and asked Daniel 3 times when he was coming home, while he sat across from me at dinner. Meanwhile, I used my burner phone to hire a private investigator. Robert recommended transferred copies of all financial documents to a secure location and began building my case. The investigator, a former FBI agent named Sarah Chen, worked quickly. By Thursday afternoon, she'd discovered Stephanie's history, a sealed case in Arizona where she'd been investigated for elder abuse of her aunt. The charges were dropped when the aunt died suddenly, but the pattern was clear. Stephanie had done this before. She'd also uncovered Daniel's secrets. My successful son was drowning in gambling debts, owing $40,000 to some very unpleasant people. His company was conducting a performance review that would likely end in termination. The house, the cars, the whole facade, it was all built on credit cards and lies. That evening, as they prepared for Kyle's visit, I made my own preparations. Hidden cameras no bigger than buttons were positioned throughout the living room and dining area. My recordings were backed up to multiple locations. And most importantly, I'd spoken to Adult Protective Services, who were very interested in the medication tampering. Jefferson. Stephanie called sweetly. Our friend Kyle is here to talk about some financial planning. Are you feeling up to joining us? I shuffled out of my room, making sure to bump into the wall once and squint, as if the lights were too bright. Kyle stood in the foyer, a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a smile that reminded me of a used car salesman. Mr. Thompson, he said, extending a hand. I've heard so much about you. I understand you worked in aerospace, fascinating field. I shook his hand weakly, then stared at it as if confused why I'd done so. Yes, rockets and such. Or was it airplanes? Sometimes I can't recall exactly. Kyle's predatory smile widened. Behind him, Daniel and Stephanie practically glowed with anticipation. They thought they had me. They thought their plan was working perfectly. What they didn't know was that every agency that could help me was already mobilized. Every document they'd forged was photographed, every conversation recorded, every piece of evidence cataloged and stored. The trap wasn't being set for me. It was already closed around them. The morning after Kyle's visit, I sat in Robert Hutchinson's office surrounded by legal documents and the evidence of my son's betrayal. Robert, my old Army intelligence buddy, had aged well. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, and hands that still looked capable of field-stripping a rifle in the dark. Jefferson, the medication tampering alone is enough to have them arrested, he said, reviewing the recordings. This is attempted murder or at minimum assault. Not yet, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I need to know how deep this goes, and I need to protect my other children from any fallout. Robert nodded understanding immediately. We'd run operations together in Vietnam, where patience often meant the difference between success and catastrophe. First things first, he said, pulling out a series of documents. We're moving all your assets into an irrevocable trust. Today, they can't touch what they can't access. For the next 3 hours, we systematically protected every penny I'd worked for. My Boeing pension was rerouted to a new account at a different bank. Investment portfolios were transferred. The deed to the Renton house was placed in the trust. By noon, I was effectively judgment-proof, though no one would know it by looking at the accounts Daniel had been monitoring. Those accounts will show normal balances for another week, Robert explained. After that, they'll appear to have been frozen due to suspicious activity. Let them panic a little. Sarah Chen, the private investigator, arrived as we finished the paperwork. She carried a tablet loaded with information that made my stomach churn. Stephanie Melissa Thompson, formerly Stephanie Reynolds, formerly Stephanie Kowalski. she began swiping through documents. 3 marriages, all to older men with adult children. First husband died of a heart attack 2 months after changing his will. Second husband's daughter contested the will, claimed undue influence. Case settled out of court. And the aunt in Phoenix, I asked. Dorothy Reynolds. Died at 78, supposedly from complications of dementia. Stephanie was her caregiver and sole beneficiary. Adult Protective Services investigated but couldn't prove wrongdoing. Sarah's expression hardened. Dorothy's neighbors said she was sharp as a tack until Stephanie moved in. The pattern was clear and horrifying. My son had married a professional predator. What about Daniel? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Sarah pulled up another file. $43,000 in gambling debts to a bookie named Vincent Torino. Your son's been making minimum payments by embezzling from his company. They know, by the way. He'll be fired within 2 weeks. Embezzling, the word tasted bitter. Expense account fraud. False vendor invoices. About $60,000 over 2 years. She showed me the evidence. He's looking at federal charges if they prosecute. I closed my eyes, seeing my little boy in a baseball uniform grinning after hitting his first home run. How had that child become this desperate criminal? There's more, Sarah continued. I tracked the intercepted mail. Daniel's been opening letters from your son, Marcus, and daughter, Jennifer. They've both been trying to reach you, worried because you haven't responded to emails or calls. I haven't gotten any emails, I said, then realized. They changed my password. Probably. Marcus even flew down from Seattle last month, but Daniel told him you were traveling with friends. She showed me a text exchange between my sons. Marcus was deeply concerned, threatening to involve authorities if he couldn't speak to me soon. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I need secure phones for Marcus and Jennifer, and plane tickets for this weekend. Robert smiled grimly. Already ahead of you. They'll be here Saturday, staying at the Marriott downtown under assumed names. For the next 4 days, I perfected my performance. At breakfast, I'd stare at my cereal, as if puzzled by its purpose. During lunch, I'd ask Daniel when he was coming home from school, as if he were still a teenager. By dinner, I was calling Stephanie by my late wife's name, and wondering aloud where I'd parked my car, a car I hadn't driven in months. They ate it up like starving dogs. Dad's really declining fast. I heard Daniel tell someone on the phone. We're doing our best, but it might be time for professional care. Meanwhile, I was anything but declining. After they left for work or errands, I'd drive my rental car, paid for in cash, hidden 3 blocks away, to meet with Robert and Sarah. We built an airtight case documenting every forged check, every intercepted letter, every manipulated medication. Dr. Morrison, my physician of 20 years, was appalled when I showed him what Stephanie had done with my medications. Jefferson, your blood pressure's been dangerously high. I wondered why the medication wasn't working. He immediately documented everything in my medical record and wrote a statement for the legal file. Missing these doses could have caused a stroke. This is attempted murder. Will you play along for a few more days? I asked. If they call, tell them you're concerned about my cognitive state. Give them just enough rope. He agreed, though I could see it pained him to lie even to protect me. Friday night, I made my masterstroke. At dinner, I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking about my finances. Maybe you're right, I told Daniel, letting my hand shake slightly as I reached for my water. This money stuff is getting confusing. All these accounts and passwords. Perhaps I do need help. Stephanie nearly choked on her wine in excitement. We're just concerned about you, Jefferson. It's nothing to be ashamed of getting older. My financial advisor keeps calling about some forms. I continued playing confused. Something about beneficiary updates, or was it insurance? I can't keep it straight anymore. We could help with that, Daniel said quickly. In fact, Kyle knows about these things. He could review everything, make sure it's all in order. Would you? That would be such a relief. I smiled gratefully, then frowned. Though I should probably have my own advisor there too, just to explain things. Would Sunday work after church? They agreed so fast I thought Stephanie might pull something in her neck from nodding. That night I could hear them celebrating through the walls. Champagne cork popping, Stephanie giggling about which debts to pay first, Daniel slurring something about finally getting what he deserved. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. They thought they'd won. They thought the confused old man had finally broken. What they didn't know was that my financial advisor was actually Robert in disguise. That Adult Protective Services would be monitoring the meeting through hidden cameras. That Marcus and Jennifer were already in town with power of attorney documents that superseded anything I might sign under duress. What they didn't know was that every friend they'd told about my dementia had been contacted by Sarah with the truth. That their neighbors had been interviewed about elder abuse. That the fake nurse Stephanie planned to bring in had already been identified and warned off by authorities. They didn't know that Daniel's employer had received an anonymous tip about the embezzlement complete with evidence. That Vincent Torino had been informed Daniel was about to come into money, but was planning to skip town instead of paying his debts. That Stephanie's ex-husband had been contacted and was very interested in sharing his story with prosecutors. Most importantly, they didn't know that I'd found my spine again. Grief had made me vulnerable, but their betrayal had forged me into something harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than they could imagine. Sunday was coming. They thought it would be their payday the moment when the confused old man signed over his life savings. Instead, it would be the day their world came crashing down. And I would be standing in the wreckage, no longer the victim, but the architect of their destruction. Saturday morning arrived with Seattle's typical February drizzle, but I felt sunshine in my bones as I prepared for what was to come. Daniel and Stephanie had left early for what they called estate planning preparation, likely meeting with their crooked lawyer to finalize documents they'd never get to use. I drove my rental car to the downtown Marriott, taking 3 different routes to ensure I wasn't followed. In the lobby, I saw them immediately. Marcus, tall and distinguished in his surgeon's bearing, and Jennifer, my daughter, who'd inherited her mother's grace and her father's steel spine. Dad. Marcus embraced me, and I could feel his medical training in the way he subtly checked my pulse, looked into my eyes, assessed my gait. You look good. When Daniel said you were declining, all an act, I assured him. One worthy of an Oscar if I say so myself. Jennifer hugged me, tight tears in her eyes. We've been so worried. Daniel kept saying you didn't want visitors, that you were too confused for phone calls. I know, sweetheart. I know everything now. We spent the morning in Robert's conference room bringing my children up to speed on their brother's betrayal. Marcus, ever the clinician, absorbed the medical tampering evidence with a fury I rarely saw in him. She could have killed you, he said, hands clenched. Stopping lisinopril abruptly can cause rebound hypertension stroke heart attack. I'll have her medical license. Wait, she doesn't have one. I'll have her arrested. All in good time, Robert counseled. Tomorrow's meeting is crucial. We need them to fully incriminate themselves. Jennifer, who worked as a federal prosecutor in Chicago, reviewed the financial fraud documentation with professional interest. The forged checks are federal crimes since they crossed state lines electronically, she noted. The elder abuse is state level, but with the interstate fraud component, FBI could claim jurisdiction. You're not handling this case, I said firmly. Conflict of interest. No, but I know who will, she smiled grimly. My colleague Patricia Winters specializes in elder fraud. She's been looking for a case like this. We spent the afternoon finalizing preparations. Robert would pose as my financial advisor, Harold Weatherby, complete with business cards and a false LinkedIn profile Sarah had created. Adult Protective Services agents would be stationed in a van outside monitoring video feeds from the hidden cameras. Local police were on standby. What about Kyle? Marcus asked. Stephanie's brother sounds dangerous. Handled, Sarah replied. Mr. Torino received an anonymous tip that Kyle owes him $30,000 from a failed betting scheme 3 years ago. Kyle won't be making tomorrow's meeting." "And the nurse?" Jennifer inquired. "Rebecca Martinez Bort," I said, remembering the name from my reconnaissance. "Stephanie's hired her to pose as a cognitive evaluation specialist. She's actually a cosmology school dropout with a suspended nursing assistant license. She's been warned that impersonating a medical professional is a felony," Robert added. "If she shows up, she'll be arrested on sight." That evening, I returned to Daniel's house to find them in high spirits. They'd bought lobster for dinner, on credit, no doubt, and Stephanie wore new jewelry. "Feeling better today, Jefferson?" she asked, studying me for signs of the confusion I'd been displaying. I obliged by looking momentarily lost, then recovering. "Oh yes, thank you, Sandra. I mean Stephanie. Sorry, dear." They exchanged delighted glances. "Dad," Daniel said, pouring expensive wine I knew they couldn't afford. "About tomorrow's meeting. Kyle will be there, and we thought it might be good to have a medical professional present too. Just to help explain things if you get confused." "That sounds wise." I agreed then, let worry creep into my voice. "I do hope I don't embarrass myself. Sometimes I feel like my mind is swimming through fog." "That's why we're here to help," Stephanie cooed, patting my hand with fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. After dinner, I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion. In my room, I sent coded messages to the team. Everything was in place. The trap was set, baited with their own greed and arrogance. I pulled out Martha's photo from my wallet, the one from our 40th anniversary. "I'm sorry you had to see what Daniel became," I whispered. "But I promise you I'll protect what we built together." Sleep came fitfully that night. I dreamed of Daniel as a boy crying after falling off his bike, reaching for me to make it better. But when I reached back, his face morphed into the calculating stranger who saw me as nothing more than a bank account to raid. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Martha's funeral. It seemed fitting since today I'd be burying my relationship with my son. At breakfast, I performed my final act. While reaching for orange juice, I knocked over my coffee cup, then stared at the spill, as if puzzled by how it happened. "Oh dear," I mumbled. "Clumsy me." "No worries, Jefferson," Stephanie said sweetly, mopping up the mess while giving Daniel a meaningful look. "Happens to everyone." "Does it?" I asked vaguely. "I seem to be having more accidents lately. Yesterday I couldn't remember how to tie my shoes. Had to wear loafers instead." It was a complete lie, but they believed every word. Why wouldn't they? They'd been seeing what they wanted to see for months. A declining old man ripe for exploitation. "Dad," Daniel said carefully, "do you remember the meeting today about your finances?" I scrunched my face in concentration. Was that today? I thought. "No, you're right. Sunday, after church." I paused, looking troubled. "Though I haven't been to church since Martha." "It's okay," Daniel soothed. "We'll have the meeting here. Your advisor, Harold, is coming, and we'll all help make sure everything is sorted out properly." "Harold," I repeated, as if trying to place the name. "Yes, Harold's a good man. Known him for how long now? Sometimes the years jumble together." They could barely contain their excitement. The confused old man who couldn't remember how long he'd known his financial advisor would be easy to manipulate into signing anything. If only they knew Harold was actually Robert, whom I'd known for 48 years. If only they knew that every word, every gesture, every moment of confusion was as carefully choreographed as a military operation. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. "That'll be Harold," Daniel said, practically sprinting to the door. I stood slowly adjusting my suit jacket with trembling hands that weren't really trembling at all. This was it. The moment when predator and prey would finally reveal their true natures. But as they were about to discover they'd gotten the roles reversed, the week leading up to the Sunday meeting tested every ounce of self-control I'd developed over 68 years. Daniel and Stephanie, emboldened by my apparent deterioration, became increasingly brazen in their schemes. Monday morning, I shuffled into the kitchen to find Stephanie going through my wallet. "Oh, Jefferson." She startled, quickly putting it back on the counter. "I was just making sure you had your insurance cards for the doctor's appointment." "What doctor's appointment?" I asked, genuinely puzzled, since none existed. "The one we discussed last night." She lied smoothly. "Dr. Renfield wants to do a cognitive evaluation." Dr. Renfield, the flexible doctor Kyle had mentioned. I made a mental note while appearing confused. "Did we discuss that I don't recall?" "That's why we're seeing him," she said gently, patronizingly, "to help with the memory issues." Later that morning, while they believed I was napping, I observed from the hallway as Stephanie made a phone call. "Yes, Dr. Renfield. This Sunday after our financial meeting. He'll be tired and more pliable then." A pause. "The standard evaluation that shows moderate dementia requiring immediate intervention. Yes, I understand your fee." I slipped back to my room and texted Sarah from my burner phone. She responded within minutes. Dr. Renfield was already under investigation for fraudulent competency evaluations. My case would seal his fate. Tuesday brought a new low. I caught Daniel in my room photographing my financial documents with his phone. "Dad, I didn't hear you come in," he said, not even attempting to hide his actions. "I was just making copies for Sunday's meeting. Thought it would help to have everything organized." "That's thoughtful of you," I replied, letting my voice quaver. "I do get overwhelmed by all those numbers lately." He smiled, that same smile he'd worn as a child when he'd successfully snuck cookies from the jar. Only now he was trying to steal my entire life. "Don't worry about any of it," he assured me. "Stephanie and I will handle everything." That evening, the fake nurse arrived for a practice evaluation. Rebecca Martinez wore scrubs she'd probably bought at Walmart and carried a clipboard filled with official-looking forms. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with nervous eyes that kept darting between Stephanie and her supposed patient. "Mr. Thompson," she said in an overly bright voice, "I'm going to ask you some questions to see how you're doing today." The questions were insultingly simple at first. "What year is it whose the president count backward from 20? I answered correctly, but slowly adding strategic pauses and confusion. Then came the manipulation. "Now, Mr. Thompson, can you tell me who manages your finances?" I used to," I said hesitantly. "But lately the numbers swim around. Would it be easier if someone helped you, someone you trust?" I looked at Daniel with carefully crafted vulnerability. "Would you help me, son? I don't want to be a burden, but—" "Of course, Dad," he said quickly. "We're family." Rebecca made notes, no doubt documenting my voluntary request for help. What she didn't know was that my phone was recording everything, including her fraudulent representation as a medical professional. Wednesday, they brought Kyle back for dinner. Stephanie's brother oozed false charm while dropping hints about senior living communities and asset protection strategies. "You know, Jefferson," he said over pot roast that tasted like sawdust in my mouth. "At your age, simplified living can be liberating. No more worrying about bills, maintenance, all that hassle." "But I like my house," I protested weakly. "Martha and I built our life there." "Of course," Kyle soothed. "But think how nice it would be to have professionals handling everything. 3 meals a day, activities, medical care right on site." They were already planning to warehouse me. The retirement community brochures Stephanie had hidden in the kitchen drawer were for places that cost $6,000 a month. Paid for with my money, naturally. Thursday was when they overplayed their hand. I'd gone to check the mail, really to meet Sarah at the corner coffee shop. When I returned, Daniel was on the phone in the garage, not realizing the acoustic properties that let his voice carry clearly into the yard. "No, Vincent, I told you. By Monday, I'll have the full $43,000. My father's signing everything over on Sunday." A pause. "Yes, all of it. Then I'm thinking we could discuss that Lakers bet I wanted to place." My son planned to pay off his gambling debts and immediately rack up more. The cycle would never end until he'd burned through every penny I'd saved. Inside, I found Stephanie had laid out legal documents on the dining table, practicing with a pen to forge my signature. She'd gotten quite good at it. The Jefferson Thompson flowing across the page looked remarkably like my own handwriting. "Stephanie," I called out, shuffling into view. She swept the papers into a folder with practiced ease. "Just organizing for Sunday, Jefferson. Nothing to worry about." "I worry about everything these days," I said truthfully. "My mind feels like it's full of cotton some days." "That's why we're here," she said, that predatory smile spreading across her face. "To take all those worries away." Friday night, they made their final mistake. Believing I was deeply asleep, they'd doubled my accidentally switched pills. They held a celebration party. Kyle arrived with champagne, and they spent hours dividing up my assets. "The Renton house goes on the market Monday," Daniel said. "Quick sale even if we take a hit. Need the liquid capital." "I'll handle the investment accounts," Kyle offered. "Move everything into high-risk, high-reward opportunities." "And Jefferson?" Stephanie asked. "Golden Acres has a bed available," Daniel replied. "Basic shared room, but it'll do. Medicare covers most of it." They laughed then, actually laughed, at the thought of putting me in the cheapest facility they could find while stealing everything I'd worked for. I lay in bed no longer feigning sleep, but wide awake with cold fury. These vultures weren't just planning to take my money. They intended to destroy my dignity, my autonomy, my very life. Saturday morning, I gave them one last performance. At breakfast, I couldn't remember how to use a fork, eating scrambled eggs with my fingers while they watched in delight. I called Daniel by his grandfather's name and asked Stephanie why she'd dyed her hair, thinking she was my long-dead sister. "Tomorrow's the big day," Stephanie told Daniel as they cleared the dishes. "By this time next week, we'll be free." Free, as if I were a prison they'd been sentenced to. I spent the afternoon in my room ostensibly napping, but actually coordinating final details with my team. Marcus confirmed all medical documentation was ready. Jennifer had federal prosecutors on standby. Robert had prepared every legal document we'd need. Sarah had surveillance footage backed up in triplicate. The weather report called for clear skies on Sunday, but a storm was coming nonetheless. A reckoning years in the making, born from greed and nurtured by betrayal. That night, as Daniel and Stephanie slept peacefully in their soon-to-be foreclosed mansion, I sat by my window and watched the stars. Somewhere up there, Martha was watching. I hoped she'd forgive me for what I was about to do to our son. But some sins demand justice. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. And some storms once gathered must break. Sunday would dawn in just 6 hours. Let them dream of easy money and problem-free futures. Reality would arrive with the doorbell at 2 o'clock. Sunday arrived with crisp Pacific Northwest sunshine that seemed to mock the darkness about to unfold in my son's house. I woke at 5:30, my internal military clock still precise after all these years. Through the thin walls, I could hear Daniel and Stephanie already stirring their excitement, palpable. I went through my morning routine methodically. Shower shave, blood pressure medication, the real ones I'd hidden, not Stephanie's aspirin substitutes. In the mirror, I saw Jefferson Thompson, aerospace engineer, veteran father-widower. But today, I'd be something else entirely, the architect of justice. At breakfast, I gave them what they expected. I fumbled with my coffee cup called Stephanie by 3 different names and stared at my scrambled eggs as if trying to remember their purpose. When Daniel mentioned the 2 o'clock meeting, I looked blank until he patiently explained it 3 times. "Your financial advisor is coming, Dad. Harold Weatherby. Remember, we're going to organize your accounts to make things easier for you." "Oh, yes." I nodded vaguely. Harold's a good man. Knew his father in the war. Or was that someone else? They could barely contain their glee. By 1 o'clock, the house buzzed with preparation. Stephanie had laid out documents across the dining room table, powers of attorney property deeds, bank account transfers, living will modifications. All pre-filled, requiring only my signature to transfer my entire life's work to their control. Daniel paced nervously, checking his phone every few minutes. "Kyle should be here by now," he muttered. "He'll be here, chum," Stephanie assured him, though I caught the flash of concern in her eyes. She didn't know her brother was currently explaining to Vincent Torino why he'd dodged a $30,000 debt for 3 years. At 1:45, a text arrived on Daniel's phone that made him curse. "Rebecca can't make it. Says something about a family emergency." "We don't need her," Stephanie said quickly. "We have enough documentation of his condition." They didn't know Rebecca Martinez was currently in custody, tearfully explaining to federal agents how Stephanie had hired her to impersonate a medical professional. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. "That'll be Harold," Daniel said, straightening his tie. "Remember, Dad, just follow our lead. We're here to help." I shuffled behind them to the door, making sure to grip the wall for support I didn't need. Daniel opened it to reveal Robert in his Harold Weatherby disguise. Gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, leather briefcase that looked every inch the successful financial advisor. "Mr. Thompson." Robert greeted Daniel with a professional handshake. "Thank you for arranging this meeting, and this must be your father." "Jefferson," I said, slowly extending a trembling hand. "Pleased to. Have we met before?" "Several times," Robert assured me gently. "But it's been a while. Shall we get started?" They led us to the dining room where Stephanie's carefully arranged documents waited. I noticed she'd strategically placed the conservatorship papers at the bottom building up to the main event. "Before we begin," Robert said, settling into his chair, "I should mention I've invited a few others who have an interest in Jefferson's affairs." Daniel froze. "Others?" The doorbell rang again. "That would be them now," Robert continued pleasantly. "Would you mind—" Stephanie shot Daniel a worried look, but he was already moving to the door. Social conditioning is powerful. When someone rings your doorbell during a scheduled meeting, you answer it. I heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath, then Marcus's voice. "Hello, brother. Hope we're not late." They filed in like an army unit taking positions. Marcus in his crisp blue shirt that brought out his eyes, Jennifer in her prosecutor's power suit, and behind them 2 representatives from Adult Protective Services and a uniformed police officer. "What is this?" Stephanie demanded, standing so quickly her chair toppled backward. "Sit down, Stephanie," Jennifer commanded with the authority of someone who'd faced down federal judges. "Or would you prefer to be placed under arrest immediately?" "Arrest?" Daniel's face had gone pale. "Dad, what's going on? Who are these people?" I stood slowly, but this time there was no tremor, no confusion, no weakness. I straightened to my full height and looked my son directly in the eye. "These people, Daniel, are your brother and sister whom you've been telling I was too ill to see. This is Officer Patricia Williams from the Elder Abuse Unit, and these are social workers from Adult Protective Services." I paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. "And I'm your father, completely sound of mind and fully aware of every crime you've committed against me." The silence stretched tight as a wire. Then Stephanie lunged for the documents on the table. Marcus moved faster, sweeping them out of reach, while the officer stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to need you to sit down," Officer Williams said calmly. "This is entrapment," Stephanie shrieked. "He's confused. Tell them, Daniel, tell them about his dementia." But Daniel couldn't speak. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Confused. I pulled out my phone, tapping the recording app. "Let's see how confused I've been." Stephanie's voice filled the room. "His blood pressure pills look just like aspirin. I've been swapping them out gradually. Missing doses of lisinopril can cause confusion, dizziness, all the symptoms we need to document." Then Daniel. "The back rent idea is brilliant. 6 months at $2,300 a month. That's almost $14,000 we can demand immediately." I played recording after recording. Their financial plotting, the forged signatures, the plans to have me declared incompetent, the arrangement with Dr. Renfield, every sordid detail of their scheme. You recorded us. Daniel finally found his voice. In our own home. My home too, according to you, I replied coldly. The home where you planned to steal my life savings before dumping me in the cheapest facility you could find. Robert opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, you're both under investigation for multiple felonies, including elder abuse fraud forgery and attempted murder through medication tampering. Attempted murder. Daniel's knees buckled. He collapsed into a chair. I wouldn't. Withholding blood pressure medication from a 68-year-old man with hypertension. Marcus stepped forward every inch, the doctor. I reviewed Dad's medical records. His blood pressure spiked to stroke level 3 times in the past month. You're lucky you're not facing actual murder charges. Jennifer took over with prosecutorial precision. The forged checks constitute federal wire fraud. The fake rent scheme is extortion. The conspiracy with Dr. Renfield, who's already in custody, by the way, is conspiracy to commit fraud. You're looking at 20 years minimum. Hi. Kyle, Stephanie suddenly shouted. Where's Kyle? He'll explain everything. Your brother is currently indisposed, Sarah Chen said, entering the room with perfect timing. Something about an old debt to Vincent Torino. He was quite eager to discuss it when Mr. Torino's associates found him this morning. Stephanie's face went white as she realized her support network had crumbled. Now then, I said, moving to the head of the table where they'd planned to have me sign my life away. Let's discuss what happens next. Daniel looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. Dad, please. We're family. I'm your son. My son died 6 months ago, I said quietly. He died the moment he decided his father was nothing but a bank account to pillage. We were desperate, he pleaded. The house, the debts. We were drowning. So you decided to drown me instead. I shook my head. You had options, Daniel. You could have asked for help, could have downsized, declared bankruptcy, gotten honest jobs. Instead, you chose to destroy the man who raised you. Officer Williams stepped forward. Daniel Thompson. Stephanie Thompson, you're under arrest for elder abuse fraud and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around their wrists, Stephanie turned venomous. You planned this, you evil old bastard! You set us up! No, I corrected her. You set yourselves up. I just refused to be your victim. They were let out in handcuffs, as neighbors gathered on the lawn, the same neighbors they'd told about my supposed dementia. I saw the Johnsons who'd been so concerned when Daniel said I was deteriorating. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down, who'd tried to visit but been turned away. All watching as the truth revealed itself in the back of a police cruiser. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. You okay, Dad? I will be, I said, meaning it. Let's go home, my real home. As we left that house of lies and broken trust, I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth saving. The storm had broken, the revelation complete. Now came the harder part, learning to live with a sun-shaped hole in my heart. 3 months later, I stood in the visiting room at Monroe Correctional Complex, watching my son shuffle in wearing orange coveralls that hung loose on his diminished frame. Daniel had lost 30 pounds and gained 10 years in appearance. Prison does that to soft men who lived soft lives. Dad, he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he sat across from me. You came. I almost didn't, I admitted honestly. Marcus thought I shouldn't. Jennifer said it would only hurt me, but I needed to see you once more. I'm sorry, Daniel began, but I held up my hand. Are you sorry for what you did or sorry you got caught? I asked, because for months you looked me in the eye while planning to destroy me. That takes a special kind of cruelty, son. He flinched at the word son, but didn't deny it. I was desperate. The gambling debt, Stephanie pushing me the house about to foreclose. I wasn't thinking straight. You were thinking straight enough to forge my signature 17 times, I countered. Straight enough to intercept letters from your siblings. Straight enough to watch your wife poison me slowly and do nothing. When you put it like that, Daniel's shoulders slumped further. There's no excuses there. I became someone I don't even recognize. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in a year, I observed. How much time did you get? 2 years with good behavior. Could have been worse. The judge considered my cooperation. He managed a bitter smile. Turns out Stephanie had quite the history. They linked her to 3 other elder fraud cases. She's looking at 15 to 20. I wasn't surprised. Stephanie had turned on Daniel immediately, claiming he'd masterminded everything while she was just a dutiful wife, following orders. The recordings proved otherwise. And the house? I asked, though I already knew. Foreclosed, everything's gone. He met my eyes for the first time. I lost everything trying to steal everything. There's probably a lesson in that. Probably, as I agreed. We sat in silence for a moment before Daniel spoke again. I know I have no right to ask, but what about you? Where are you living? I bought a condo in a senior community in Redmond, near Marcus. It's nice. I have my own space, but there's community when I want it. I play poker every Thursday with a group of retired Boeing folks. Turns out I'm not the only one whose kids tried to take advantage. That's good, Daniel said softly. You deserve peace. I'm also running a foundation, I continued. The Martha Thompson Foundation for Elder Protection. We provide legal services to seniors facing financial exploitation. 17 cases so far, all successful. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Mom would have loved that. She would have hated what you became, I said bluntly. But yes, she would have loved helping others. Will you? He started, then stopped. Never mind, I know the answer. Ask, I prompted. Will you ever forgive me? I'd thought about this moment for 3 months, practiced different responses. In the end, only truth mattered. I forgave you the day you were arrested, I said, watching surprise flicker across his face. Forgiveness isn't for you, Daniel. It's for me. Carrying hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, I continued. You broke something that can't be repaired. Trust once shattered is like a broken mirror. You can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. I understand, he whispered. Do you? I leaned forward. Because here's what I need you to understand. You're my son, and I'll always love the boy you were. But the man you became, that man is a stranger who tried to destroy me. I can't let that stranger back into my life. What about when I get out? He asked desperately. Maybe we could start over. When you get out, you'll have a trust fund of $50,000, I said, watching his eyes widen. Enough for a fresh start, but with conditions. You'll attend Gamblers Anonymous. You'll maintain employment. You'll have no access to my other assets or contact with me unless I initiate it. That's generous, Daniel managed. It's what your mother would have wanted, I said simply. She always believed in second chances, but Daniel, there won't be a third chance. Use this time to figure out who you want to be when you walk out of here. The guard signaled our time was up. I stood my knees, protesting slightly. Age is undefeated after all. Dad, Daniel called as I turned to go. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. Not just for getting caught, for all of it, for becoming someone who could do that to his own father. I looked back at my son, broken, humbled, maybe finally seeing clearly. I know, I said. Work on becoming someone better. That's all any of us can do. Outside the prison, Marcus waited by his Tesla concern etched on his face. How was it? Necessary, I said, settling into the passenger seat. He's still my son Marcus, just not someone I can trust. You're more forgiving than I would be, Marcus said, pulling onto the highway. After what they did, forgiveness isn't endorsement, I explained. It's release. I spent too many years carrying other people's weight in Vietnam. I won't spend my remaining years carrying Daniel's. We drove in comfortable silence to Redmond, where my new life awaited. The condo had a view of the mountains, a kitchen Martha would have loved, and neighbors who knew my name but not my story, unless I chose to share it. That evening, I hosted dinner for Marcus, his wife Linda, and their twins. Jennifer had flown in from Chicago with news that she'd been promoted to lead prosecutor in the Elder Fraud Division. Inspired, she said, by what happened to me. "I've seen too many families destroyed by greed," she said over coffee and Linda's homemade apple pie. "If I can prevent even one person from going through what you did, Dad, it's worth it." After they left, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint Mount Rainier in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Foundation meeting tomorrow. Mrs. Chen's case is ready for trial. The grandson won't know what hit him." I smiled, remembering the terrified elderly woman who'd come to us after her grandson had drained her savings account. Tomorrow, she'd get justice. Next week, we'd help someone else. One victory at a time, pushing back against those who prey on the vulnerable. My phone buzzed again. This time a notification from the prison email system. Daniel had sent a message. Just 2 words. "Thank you." I deleted it without responding. Some bridges once burned should stay ash. As darkness settled over the Pacific Northwest, I thought about the journey from that dinner table confrontation to this moment of peace. The pain hadn't disappeared. Betrayal leaves scars that never fully fade. But I'd learned something valuable. We can't control what others do to us, but we absolutely control how we respond. Daniel and Stephanie had thought they were stealing from a weak old man. Instead, they'd awakened a warrior who'd forgotten his strength. They'd tried to take everything and ended up losing it all. Meanwhile, I'd lost a son, but found a purpose, lost trust, but gained wisdom, lost innocence about family, but gained deeper connections with those who proved worthy. Martha's voice seemed to whisper on the evening breeze. "You did good, Jefferson. You protected yourself and helped others. That's all anyone can ask." I raised my coffee mug to the stars. Here's to new beginnings, love, and to the strength to create them, no matter how old we get. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight I was at peace. A survivor, not a victim. A protector, not prey. And that made all the difference. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining me on this journey. Stories like mine happen every day across America. Elderly parents betrayed by those they should trust most life savings, stolen by familiar faces, dignity stripped away by people who claim to care. Have you or someone you know faced similar betrayal from family? How did you handle it? What would you have done differently in my shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button. It helps others find these important narratives about elder protection and family betrayal. Subscribe to hear more real-life stories of triumph over adversity, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone, that there's always hope, always a way to fight back. Remember, your golden years should be exactly that. Golden. Don't let anyone, regardless of their relationship to you, tarnish them with greed. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand up to anyone who tries to take advantage of your kindness. You're stronger than you know. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay strong, and most importantly, stay true to yourself. With gratitude and hope, Jefferson.